We're going to talk about something that is very current and very in the now here in Brooklyn. For our BK Live, a new world, new challenges. Let's take a look at some of the slides on immigration here. In Brooklyn, fully 1/3 of the population, according to the last U.S. Census taken in 2010, is an immigrant. There are 3.5% increase in that population since 2010. So fully 1/3 of us happen to have been born in other countries. Welcome. Let's take a little bit of a deeper dive here and look at Brooklyn immigration. Now, this is according to U.S. Census figures of a regional census just last year in 2015. Caribbean immigrants make up the bulk of those folks, under 300,000 just, which is outpacing Eastern Asian people who are about 152,000 and Eastern European who make up 140,000 by region here in New York. And South Americans are about 83,000 people strong here, according to these 2015 regional numbers in Brooklyn. If we take a little bit of a deeper dive into our country here, by country, immigration sort of changes a little bit. The Chinese happen to be at the top of that list with just over 143,000 Brooklyn folks coming here. In Jamaica, there are about 67,000 people who've repatriated to the U.S., and 64,000 Haitians are now living in Brooklyn. Looking at the bottom of the list, there are about 19,000 people from Pakistan who now call their home Brooklyn. So if we look at just what languages are being spoken here, in homes in Brooklyn, English as the first language is about 55,000 is the primary language spoken at home, 55%, excuse me. 17% of the folks speak Spanish primarily, and Chinese makes up about 5% of the dominant language in homes. And if you look at the bottom of the list, it still is Brooklyn, people. Yiddish is holding on there with 3% of the people using Yiddish as their primary language in the home. So that's just a little bit of the overview of language and immigrants in Brooklyn. Let's get into more detail in the A block.
Like we say, Brooklyn is the universe, and as we kick off a week of dialogue on BK Live about immigration, we're happy to have two of the key participants in Brooklyn's own UN Day, designed to raise awareness about the UN's human rights and global peace initiatives. The event on October 26 is being co-sponsored by the United Nations Association of the USA Brooklyn chapter and is open to the public. We're very happy to welcome Dr. Loretta Patton-Greenidge, a retired family practice physician here in New York and a UNA USA board member here in Brooklyn. Thank you so much for being here, Doctor.
Thank you for having me.
We're also joined by Yasmin Sharif, a human rights lawyer for over 25 years and one of next week's keynote speakers. She's worked in a number of international conflict zones and is also the author of an inspiring book about the UN vision called The Case for Humanity: An Extraordinary Season. Welcome to BK Live. Thank you both for being here.
Thank you. Doctor, let's start with you. This is the second annual Brooklyn UN Day. Why don't you tell us how this idea came about?
Yes, that's correct. As you may not know, part of the reason for the Brooklyn Association is to perform the ideals of the United Nations. And that is to inspire people, and we want to educate Americans. The Brooklyn chapter, in collaboration with Alpha Kappa Alpha Sorority, which is an international organization as well, the Delta Rho Omega chapter have collaborated together to have the UN Day celebration, which will be on October 26th.
Excellent.
So looking at the broader landscape of where we are, Americans are in the middle of an election year and we hear a lot of promises, but you've been in the middle of a lot of conflict zones. What do you think about America's position and our responsibility to the rest of the world as outlined in the UN Charter?
Well, I can only speak to the UN Charter, as that's my background. But I would say, and I think that it's important to remember that the United Nations, the Charter was proclaimed in San Francisco. And the UN leadership and the president of that time were with Eleanor Roosevelt, of course, being one of the driving forces behind the Universal Declaration for Human Rights, played a very strong moral authority, a moral role for the world at large. So I think with that, and being a very powerful country, the US has an enormous, I would say, both responsibility and a great honor to lead on human rights and all the issues that come with that.
What, if anything, can you tell us about the Paris Agreement and its implications?
Well, I mean, the Paris Agreement relates back to the whole issue and the challenge of our times of climate change. And it was created within the UN Framework Convention on climate change. And within that, there are numbers of agreements on how to improve the situation of green gases emission, reduction of the temperature and so forth, which have far-reaching consequences that eventually may also lead, besides migration of people who are not able to withstand the pressure of climate change, but often also culminating in armed conflicts. And further poverty and marginalization that leads then to violence and conflict. And with that comes also numerous systematic violations of human rights. As we have seen, I think Darfur in Sudan is a very telling example of how the scarcity of water, desertification has impacted and eventually culminated in a conflict. So that's how also human rights becomes related to the whole issue of climate change. Yes, and the Paris Agreement is an agreement to try to address this. As the challenge of climate change is only accelerating by the year, and as of today has yielded alone, just from climate change related causes, 22.5 million refugees since 2008.
So, Doctor, we know that there are AKA women all over the globe leading in various industries and leading a lot of fights right here in Brooklyn. Why is it important, especially in the context of all the horrible things that are happening at home, to keep that global view and expanding and participating in things like UN Day?
Okay, well, UN Day is a worldwide celebration, and Alpha Kappa Alpha, as you said, is an international organization. We have chapters in Asia, Europe, Africa, the Caribbean, and of course here in North America. And part of AKA's role is also to educate. We have 5 targets. We concentrate on health promotion, education, family, the environment, and of course the global impact of certain problems. And this is why the collaboration with UNA has been so important.
So what can we expect to see at Borough Hall when we drop in for UN Day? A little preview of your keynote, perhaps? What is the environment going to be like?
Yes. As you said, Yasmin will be one of our keynote speakers. We will have a panel discussion. We will have live entertainment. There will be an opportunity for people to to network.
That too.
With
Sometimes hand in hand.
with other activists and other organizations. And this event will take place at 4:30 p.m. to 9 p.m. at Borough Hall in Brooklyn. And it's a great opportunity for people to come out. It's free, open to the public, and you can RSVP by going to www.usanabrooklyn.org.
Awesome.
Yasmin, let's talk about your book you recently wrote. What sort of issues does it cover? How might it relate to something like UNA Day here in Brooklyn?
Well, it's actually called not the extraordinary season, actually, Case for Humanity, an extraordinary session, which makes a whole difference because, let me say, the book has brought together all the great personalities through our history, the artists, the poets, the politicians, into the Security Council in an invented session, but everything they say in this discussion is actually quoted from them authentically, what they actually once said.
Gotcha.
So I tried to bring together all that wisdom. Why did I write this book? Because I saw so much human suffering around the globe, and I see the United Nations as our very last hope for multilateralism and for a vision that is universal. It doesn't matter where we come from, it doesn't matter our religion, our cultural background, our language. It's something that we can all subscribe to at the core of who we are, our humanity. But we are today, we are standing at the crossroads. We have to choose maybe between the will to power, greed and ego, or the will to humanity, where we go back to that spirit that was there in 1945 when the UN was created. And it was a spirit of idealism, of compassion, of empathy. Humankind was coming out of an era of massive human suffering, great tragedies. So trying to reignite that spirit that was there. Now, the broader message of the book is that we have beautiful convention, we have universal values, and at the end of the day we are all humane inside, but it's very difficult to put that in practice in day-to-day life. So whether we are collectively or individually, so what the book does is try to break down what is it. We have beautiful values but we can't practice them, and then of course it breaks down our fears, it breaks down our need to be part of the crowd and our fear of speaking up or daring something worthy and so forth, and the need to provide environments that are inspirational and, you know, create the best that we can be. And it's inspirational because it's not just about the UN. The UN is a starting point because it's about all of us, and it's about the human family, and it's about us as individuals.
So Yasmin, in 2016, what has the UN identified as the top needs in terms of human rights and medical service around the globe?
Well, I think I can't speak for the UN per se, but refugees is going to be one of our greatest challenges today, because there has been so many armed conflicts. We see them in the Middle East, we see them elsewhere, and we also see refugees coming out of natural disasters or massive displacement movements, and also because of the increasing gap between rich and poor. People are fleeing to find better opportunities. So these population movements, the refugee issues, are going to be very big. Human rights will always be on top of the agenda. Gender equality, putting women also at the center. We are living in modern times of the 21st century. And multilateralism, we got to work together. We have to work as one. We need to align national interest with the interest of the human family. They have to be mutually reinforcing. And that is up to every statesperson and ruling leader, but it's also up to the people, because the Charter opens with "we, the people of the United Nations." It's about all of us.
We're sitting in Brooklyn now, where we have so many health disparities just from community to community, and a lot of these issues might be relatable on a different scale as we look globally. So how do you think people in Brooklyn might be uniquely positioned to offer solutions that could work here and even at a global level?
Well, what I can say is that we have, because of climate change, we have a lot of problems with cholera and other diseases. We here in Brooklyn can try to become more educated and get our dollars together to try and support some of the programs that the UN has, because the UN is in the forefront in helping with immunizations, feeding families, and also providing peacekeeping forces and other programs.
We want to get your overall thoughts on U.S. immigration policy during this election season. Yasmin, can we start with you? Any thoughts that you have?
Well, I'm not so familiar with the immigration policies because some may not have been adopted yet, and it must still be rhetoric. But I would speak just in terms of what universally apply. We have a Refugee Convention of 1951, which most states have adopted, meaning that anyone who flees persecution and cannot return to the place of origin should be afforded protection in an asylum country. So that applies to all of us. And adhering to international law is also part of being law-abiding, whether we are states or individuals. And when it comes to immigration, I think the world has always seen immigration movements. It's part of our culture, it's part of our hospitality, and I think you gave a very nice breakdown of that. So I think it applies to all, and that's also what the UN stands for.
Well, I think we've certainly inspired some folks, so let's go that last mile and tell them how they can get involved on the 26th and find themselves at Brooklyn Borough Hall for this great event.
They need to come out, learn more about climate change and about the immigration situation and refugee situation. And again, it will be October 26th, 4:30 to 9 p.m. at Brooklyn Borough Hall. And you can RSVP and get more information at www.unabrooklyn.org.
Thank you so much. We'll see you Wednesday down at Borough Hall.
Thank you
Thank you
both
very
so
much.
much.
Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you for being on BK Live.